All right, let's go ahead and get started. If we have some people join us a little later, that should be fine. Welcome. My name is Sarah. I am a librarian at the Haggard Library. And tonight we are going to be talking about digitization basics. This class is going to be a general overview about creating your own digitized personal archive. Stop waiting to scan all of your cherished family documents, photos, or important records. Uh, if you get on that now, you will have that for hopefully years to come. And so these are going to be some basic guidelines about what you might need to know to get that project of digitizing all of your um, cherished items uh, to keep them secured. So let's click through here. Okay, so tonight's PowerPoint. Oh, let me state this. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those into the chat. We have other staff with us here tonight. We have Stephanie and Trey, who will be helping answer any questions in the chat, or if they need to be asked to me, they will help relay those. If you're having any technical issues or things like that as well, you can put those in the chat and hopefully they will be able to assist. Um, yeah. So tonight, okay, so our learning objectives for tonight's presentation. First thing we are going to do is discover how developing a plan is a key step to realizing your digitization project. We are going to identify what basic equipment or software you may require and probably already have access to uh, for digitization. We are not going to be providing instruction on specific software tonight or specific hardware. This, again, is just a general overview of the sort of tools or software that you might use. And we will also talk about the need for a consistent workflow. And just a side note, we are not discussing how to maintain born digital materials. Um, some of the information that we talk about regarding digital formats, file management, folder management, that might be useful, but this is more talking about taking your physical items and how to digitize them. Any questions so far? Everybody kind of happy with what we're going to be talking about tonight? All right. So what does digitization mean to you? So typically when we are talking about um, scanning or digitization, the preferred term in archives, in genealogy, is digitization versus scanning. You could also call it digital imaging. This is not the exact same thing as preservation of physical documents. Physical documents, could be a step in the process of preservation. Um, but typically preservation would be trying to save those physical objects. So for some things like audio and visual media, where digitization is the only viable method for long-term preservation, um, it's more intertwined, but digitization itself is not preservation. So we have a couple of definitions of what digitization is. So this one from UNESCO says digitization is the creation of digital objects from physical analog originals by means of a scanner, camera, or other electronic device. So literally taking your physical paper originals and using some sort of digital optical system, turning it into a digital file. And if you didn't know, I learned this recently. UNESCO stands for the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Did not know that. Always heard of UNESCO, but never knew exactly what it was. So yeah, they are pretty authoritative on the subject matter. In other words, digitization is the converting of physical materials to digital format by using a device that optically scans the object to convert it to a digital format. Um, and that is as it's defined by the University of North Texas libraries. They have a really robust digital projects lab, so they would be experts in this as well. So digitization can result in 2D or 3D models, depending on sort of the equipment and processes used. But today we are only going to talk about 2D objects. But if you wanted to digitize some of your 3D objects, know that that is a possibility, just not anything we'll be talking about today. So in general, is this all kind of tracking what you know about digitization, or is this completely new and different to you? It's all kind of tracking. Okay. So now that you know what digitization is, why do we digitize things? So most professional institutions list many reasons or rationalizations for digitizations, along with some standards and or guidelines that exceed the basics of what we will talk about today. But the top three reasons are very, very similar, if not the exact same. The first one would be access. This is exactly what it sounds like. Access is making something available for public use or scholarly research, or simply to be able to share it with family or friends. If you have the only physical copy of something, you could make people travel from far and wide across the land to come and see it. However, if we can increase the access to it by digitizing it and putting it online, as long as you have the rights to do so, then you are going to make it available to so many more people. You can also create additional print copies once something has been digitized, which also kind of ties into the next bullet point of preservation. So even though you are not doing some physical acts of preserving the object, digitizing is a part of preservation by helping reduce physical contact or use of the originals, thus helping preserve that object by simply touching or handling them less. Our fingers have lots of oils and are more acidic, or paper can be acidic too, and then in combination with the oils or being out in the open can really damage the items. So if you've digitized it and made an additional print copy, more people are going to have access to that. More people can make copies and have access to it. And you while preserving and saving the original for future generations in case it needs to be accessed again later or duplicated, things like that. Um, for preservation as well, uh, you can digitally file duplicate. So again, you could uh, send a copy of the file to somebody across the world without them having to come to you and get it. And digital copies, you can typically, especially with like photos and stuff like that, you can keep them with similar settings and have minimal, if any, degradation of the file, which is really cool. And lastly, for preservation, this also does create a surrogate of the item in case of catastrophic loss. So, for example, if there was a house fire or a flood and all of your family photos or birth certificates, documents got damaged to the point where they could not be saved, if you've digitized them, you will have a copy, have a surrogate of it for something that cannot be replaced. And then lastly, the biggest reason, or the biggest, one of the big three reasons to digitize is content discovery. Digital files can be magnified and zoomed in to reveal details previously not seen on the original. You can also easily compare the digital files. Um, Sometimes, like if you have a family photo and your cousin states away has a family photo and y'all want to share together, you could make like a single folder online somewhere, start putting things up together, and then start comparing and contrasting the different things you have. If you need, this goes kind of against the preservation part of it because preservation really is trying to keep something um, as is. Um, Digital files, once you have a copy, you can then enhance those files for viewing. Sometimes maybe things need to be have more contrast or colors can be adjusted to provide more legible handwritten pages. Things like that can be done without doing any harm to the image once you've digitized it. And let's see. And then lastly, digital files, sometimes if it's like a handwritten document or a document versus like a photograph, some scanners have something called optical character recognition or OCR, and that software allows for word searchable images. So it'll take the text that is on the page when you digitize it, it'll scan it and transcribe it for you automatically. I will say OCR is not perfect, but sometimes if you're having trouble reading something or it's a lot of words and you just don't want to take the time to transcribe it, OCR is very good for doing a lot of the heavy lifting and bulk work for you that then you can come back in and finesse and fine tune. And then overall, it is less work. Okay. So now moving on to the plan. Any questions so far? Nope, we're still doing good. Excellent.
None so far.
Awesome. Yeah, remember, guys, if you have any, just put them in the chat, but we're moving along. So now you know the why of digitization. Let's really talk about the how. The first thing that any project is going to need, any successful project, is a plan. So this is going to be all the fundamentals, or as you might guess from this beautiful picture here, getting all of your ducks in a row. So developing a plan might seem a little daunting. Where would I even start? That's what we're here for. That's why you're all in this class tonight, is to learn that exact thing. So the first thing you're going to do is really develop your plan, and you can break that down into a couple of manageable steps. The first thing you'll need to do is gather and find all of the materials that you have available to you. Best plan is to probably start with your own files, documents, things like that, so you can kind of get the system down and figure out how you're going to work. Unless you're trying to do this project for somebody else, and then obviously you would want to work with their stuff. But I always recommend, even if it's just like a small project, 5 images or 5, maybe like maybe or like a one big family event, all the photos from your family event, or one box of things. You don't have to tackle everything in your entire house. Um, if you don't want to at first. Sometimes just doing a small sample, figuring out your plan, developing it is a good, like get a sample size, and then you can expand it to the rest of your items. But make sure you have that set to start with. Once you have all of your materials, the next thing you're going to need to do is decide what is important. What is important enough or special enough to be worth the effort to digitize? What meaning does it hold to you? You could have like, let's say you have a shoebox of all of grandma's old papers and correspondence. So something like a love letter from her beau that was away during war might be a really interesting thing to scan and keep. Finding a receipt for getting car work done in 1972 might not have as much special meaning to go ahead and digitize. So, really, once you've gathered everything, try and sort it out, try and determine maybe you do want to scan everything. Even putting that in order of this is the most important thing that I need to scan, and this is the least important will help you try and figure out how much work you're going to have to do. The next thing you should do is then to organize by format type and or size. So let's say you open that shoebox and it has photographs and negatives and documents and letters. You might want to separate all of those out. So put all the photographs together, do all of the negatives together, sort it that way. Or sometimes you have postcards and letters. So maybe we do all the postcards together and then all the letters are different because those are slightly different formats, slightly different sizes. So that will help kind of keep everything in order. Each format type will have its own set of decisions you will have to make. More on that later. But just knowing that if you separate out, it will make your decisions later in the process easier, helps kind of solidify that in your mind. Just keep thinking, oh, I'm going to have to make more decisions with this. So if you can have those, everything you're going to make the same decisions for together, it will help you in the long run. And then lastly, you will create your master folder system to organize all of your digitized objects. And we will go over all of that very shortly. So once you have your basic plan developed, you know what materials you want to digitize, you know which are the most important, and you know how you're going to organize everything. Then you need to identify the equipment and the software that you are going to need. Some questions to ask yourself. Do you already own or have access to a scanner, a digital camera, a tripod, lights, a computer, or other equipment that you might need? I'll give you a spoiler. The answer is yes, because hopefully you all have library cards. And the Plano Public Library has digital creation spaces at Haggard, Parr, and Harrington that have digital cameras, tripod lights, if you needed stuff like that. But all 5 of your Plano Public Library locations have access to a scanner. Um, so if you don't have one at home, you have one with us. So once you've done your equipment review, oh,
Let me
yes.
jump in here and also clarify at the DCS's locations, there's also a flatbed scanner
Oh,
that
yes,
has
thank
the
you.
negative or transparency capable scanning.
Yeah, so if you have old film negatives or slides that you want to digitize, the DCS does have scanners for those as well. Thank you. Those are newer, and I forgot about them. So yes, while you're doing your equipment review, also consider any software needs. So if there's something like you have a bunch of photos, but you're going to want to do some Photoshop to them afterwards, like maybe they have creases or different things that you've decided your Photoshop skills are that amazing, or you've taken some classes through the library or through our databases on Photoshop. You need to make sure that you have access to that software as well. And again, our digital creation spaces have full Adobe software, and there should be an Adobe computer at each of the locations as well. So even if there are multiple computers, every location should have one computer that has Adobe if you need it. And then while you're identifying your equipment and software, also consider if you need to consult with an actual professional conservator due to the condition of the material. If you do have older things that are very fragile and you don't feel comfortable trying to figure out how to digitize them, You can hire people for that. There may be different costs to consider, but that is something that people will do as well. And then last step is to establish a consistent workflow. We will go more and more into detail into this, but it is very important to maintain a consistent step-by-step workflow process to avoid any errors. You don't want any missed pages or photographs or duplicating work that you've already done. Hopefully, by doing all of your planning and having this workflow, it's going to have keep your work flowing. That's why it is called a workflow, but keep you moving at a pace that you can consistently, constantly do everything, and you won't need to have to adjust and tweak as you're doing stuff, and then have to go back and redo everything that you've already done. We're trying to make this easy and save time for you, time and effort. But on that, don't rush your work. It does take time if you want to do it accurately and do it well. I'd rather do something well once and have it take a long time than doing it haphazardly 20 times that I keep having to redo it and have it not turn out well. I'd rather take my time, do it the one time, and have it done correctly. Okay, so now you have your plan. All of your ducks have gotten in a row. Now we start our project. So your folder system. One of the biggest problems that people typically encounter with digitization projects is the idea of organizing and managing the digital objects that are created. It really helps if you think about this problem thoroughly at the start of the project, because if you ignore it, it could cause a lot of problems later on. So the first thing that we recommend is to create a master folder. This is going to be where all of your high resolution files are saved. And then within that master folder, you can create additional subfolders where you can kind of separate things out more and do a little more organization. It is really helpful to use descriptive file names to help identify the folders and their organization. So if you see our example on the screen here, we have the Smith Family Archive Master. That's going to be the main folder where all of the other subfolders, as you see below, 1984 graduation, 1984 family reunion, 1985 Texas vacation, all of those folders live within the Archive Master folder. And those names were selected. It gives you I'm going to say the most key pieces of information there. The year is very helpful, what the event is. Sometimes you could put maybe even who, like maybe who was graduating. So 1984, Roger graduation. But all of those, at least, or if you had a family reunion every year, you have 84 family reunion, 85 family reunion, and those are organized a little more better than just having one family reunion folder. And then remember, the master folder should contain the high resolution master images as a backup. Anytime you're going to want to edit the images or do something with that, you should create a working copy. I would create a new folder that could be in your master. You could have a working copies folder and save either like lower resolution or images that you've edited to those folders. So you still have your original master key copy version of the things that you scanned, but then you also have the version that has been edited. Let's see. And then there are a couple of specifics with your file names that are really good to follow. The first is to only use alphanumeric letter or number combinations with a space or an underscore for separation. As you can see in our example, um, folder names and image names over on the right, that's what we have done. Do not use any special characters within the file names because some computer systems may try and interpret those characters and or to have like other functional meanings, and they might not be able to read your files later on. So if you put like a slash, I know a lot of things won't let you save with like a backslash because that is a commonly used character, or like an and sign. Sometimes it won't let you use those. So if you maintain it, keep it to just letters and numbers, occasional space or an underscore just for readability, that should be great. Do be aware though of how long you make your descriptive titles. If you can, try and limit your file names to 30 characters because many operating systems include a file pathway in the name. And sometimes long paths may not be handled by the system and could lead to copying or viewing errors in the future. Sometimes this is just a problem like when you have too many folders nested within each other. Um, so just trying to keep the titles short but descriptive. So yeah, if we're looking at our example here, we do have the Smith Family Archive Master, but that's going to be our high resolution master file with all of the, and then we have all of our subfolders. So then example, if we are looking in the 1984 graduation subfolder, we can see that we have 3 images of the graduation ceremony and then 2 of the graduation dinner. Typically, it depends on how many images you have. Most archives will use a 3-digit number. So example 001, 002, 003, instead of just 123 in their file names. Oftentimes, this is just to help keep it in numerical order. So for example, if you had, let's say 15 items and you numbered them 1, 2, 3, all the way through 15, sometimes if you're putting it alphabetical, it would say graduation ceremony 1, graduation ceremony 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then go back to 2, because technically that's in alphabetical order somehow. I don't know. Computers are dumb sometimes. We have to specify and tell it what to do. So by just adding a couple zeros in front of your number, that keeps it all in order. Any questions on our folder system?
We're good so far.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about our workflow a little bit more then. So this is kind of an example of what your workflow could look like, more or less, depending on which system you're using to scan or digitize your project. Your first block includes your first step, which is develop a plan. That will be part of your content collection. Your workflow must work for you, so it might look a little different than this basic example, but this is a good general kind of idea to keep in mind. You could choose to identify specific steps, such as where you physically keep items before and after digitizing them, in order not to confuse those items that you have completed with those still that need to be digitized. But as long as you have your consistent work pattern and you follow through with it, then yeah, whatever order your workflow is in, like you don't have to include all of the details, or you can include all of the details as long as you keep it consistent. Organize it in whatever way makes sense to you. So if you find that scanning everything and then putting it away works better, or scanning a few items and then save them, or save after every scan. They're different. Instead of doing batches, like there's different ways that you can do it. As long as it makes sense to you, just follow your pattern and stay consistent. And then do not forget to save your images and name your files as we discussed. Because you wouldn't want to do all that work and then forget that you figure out that you didn't save it. That would be really sad. Okay. So now we're getting to stuff that you might recognize. So here we have some examples of tools that you could use for scanning digitization or digital imaging. Historically, digitization processes used flatbed or planetary scanners. And these are what are used today still. You may at home like have a combination printer scanner unit, or maybe you have one at your office as well. Plano Public Library has both types of planetary and flatbed scanners. So both will have a digital sensor that only sees a narrow field of vision. So it has to move over the object being scanned. So if you're using a photocopier, you might have noticed that light, or a scanner, the light that moves when you're copying, this is the same concept. So a flatbed scanner is has the scanner, the sensor below the object, which you will place it face down on the glass. It is a flat bed, literally. They try and name things pretty logically. A planetary scanner has a digital sensor that is above the object, like floating in space like a planet. And then you put the object that you are trying to digitize face up under the glass. So if you see on the screen right now, all the way on the left with the camera above, that is a planetary scanner. And then your normal little scanner like you would have at home, or like a photocopy machine, that is a flatbed scanner. Here at the Plano Public Library and in the Genealogy Center, we have the book scanner. That is a planetary scanner. The sensor is above the object, and you can see we're scanning a book that is underneath a piece of glass, but it is facing up. In the early 1990s, a few institutions like archives and museums began using like early digital cameras to capture some scans or digital captures. This was faster than the way that things had been digitized in the past. Today, this is even improved anymore. I was going to say, I don't know that you should do that, or maybe I wouldn't have done that back in the 90s. Nowadays, though, the digital camera in your smartphone or your tablet has gotten very advanced, and you could actually probably do most of the digitization that you need to using your built-in camera. Or there are some mobile apps that you can search for and find that will help scan and do some of these things as well. But at a minimum, if you couldn't make it in to visit us here at the library, if you have a smartphone, you can still work on and have a digitization projects at home. Okay, so now we are turning our objects into pixels, literally. We're turning it all into zeros and ones. So what makes a good scan? We know what sort of tools we're going to be using, but how do we determine, is the scan actually any good? One thing you'll want to look at is how straight things are within your scan. You need to watch the skew or the crookedness of your scans. A lot of scanning software will have a deskew feature that you can straighten out your scans. But the better practice is to make sure you're trying to scan them as straight, as not crooked as possible. I bet a lot of y'all have heard in the film world, they'll say, oh, fix it in post. Or like, oh yeah, they'll do movie magic on it. That isn't always the case. You can't always do that. So I apply that to scanning as well. You can go and fix a lot of things, but if you can get a better scan in the first place, you don't have to go back and do all of that extra work later. The next thing you need to focus on for a good scan is cropping. You don't want to crop your image too tightly. Maintaining a faithful reproduction of your object means including the edges of the object sometimes. If you have just a small border just off the edge of your object, it may ensure that you get everything that is on that piece of paper or that document or photograph captured. And don't forget to scan the back as well. Even if you don't think that there's information back there, if it appears blank, it's good practice just to have. So even if somebody asks in the future, like, oh, did somebody write the name of who those people are in this photo on the back? You will have the back of it. And you can verify, oh, no names were written, or yes, they did. Let's see what those were. See, and then you can also, lastly, focus on the tones in the image, the color, is the black and white or is the grayscale close? Are the colors close? Again, and this is what I was saying about like trying to fix it in post. Try and fix it in Photoshop. You don't want to have to do that. If you can get the best image from the beginning, then you don't have to try and do all this work later. Work that you might not be able to do. I mean, hopefully, if you're just adjusting tone, that would be okay. But if you don't have to, don't make yourself extra work. Okay, so then we'll call that a good scan would be a scan that includes the entire image, is not cropped, is straight, all within the frame, and has similar to exact tones as the original. Okay, so now think back to when we were talking about our plan. One of the basics that we talked about was organized by format type. So in our imaginary shoebox of grandma's stuff, we're going to assume that you've done that part. You have taken all of your photographs, all of your negatives, all of your handwritten letters, and kept those all together. So when you're about to start scanning, we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail about things to consider, but we do want to consider the type of material we are going to be scanning, the color space, the resolution, and the file format that we will want to save it in. If you think about these things all based on different, on your different materials, on your different format types, you want to keep all of those details the same for each format type. So because again, it's a consistency. You want to have everything be the best that you can have it, but that will change between the different format types. So let's talk about some of those things. Okay, so type of material. The type of material is going to determine your equipment selection and the settings you will use. Printed books and documents are pretty good to put together. Handwritten journals or letters are kind of good to group together as well. Photographs, photographic negatives, transparencies, and slides. there's a number of different ways that you can start parsing these out. Newspaper, I would even do differently than like a deed or a birth certificate, because those are different types of paper. Um, if it's a color newspaper, if it has color images, or if it's an old just black and white, you're gonna have to think about those things. So you can get very granular and specific when you're considering the type of material, but just do your best based on the things that you have. And then, as Trey mentioned earlier, for things like negatives or slides, um, those require a scanner that has a backlight capability. Most flatbed scanners will not. It's only uh, a one directional light, but that's why we're saying those we have those special scanners in the DCS, the digital creation space, that can do backlighting as well. Okay, so we've organized all of our materials. Now let's consider the color space. The type of material and then the color space will determine how you use the scanner, i.e. What settings to select. Excuse me one moment. Oh, sorry, I had a little frog in my throat. Okay, so for example, black and white or a bitonal is literally just black and white. Often, if you're thinking of like print text, text printed in a book, it is black and white. You have the background, like the white page, and the black text on it. This is going to be different than grayscale. When you think of black and white photography, typically it is not black and white, it is grayscale. Grayscale has the 50 shades of gray. It has all the shades of gray. It isn't just black and white. Some handwritten text sometimes is better to do grayscale as well, or black and white illustration. All of those will actually pick up better in grayscale than if you were to scan them black and white. And then lastly, you have color as well. So color photographs, color illustrations. If you had a document that maybe they wrote in some really interesting colored ink, or you want to capture that people signed in different pens, somebody signed in blue, somebody signed in red, you could scan a document that in color that way. Or oftentimes like sepia toned prints, things like that, you will want to capture the color on. So instead of doing them like grayscale, you can do them as full color. Okay, so here's a really good example of bitonal black and white, a black and white image. It is very simply that. It is black and it is white. There are no color gradients. So compare that to grayscale. So even though you would consider these black and white photographs, you can see that there is actually a lot of color variation throughout those images. So we want to be able to capture all of that. So you would want to use a grayscale setting for those sort of things. And then compare that to a color image or document. Oh, so the document on the left here is a really great example of what I was talking about. So you can see there's all sorts, even though it's just a document, there's all sorts of ink colors on this document. Ooh, from 1900. There's the red in some of the title at the top and the names. You can see there's kind of grayscale black and white in the middle with that JT Stark and Company wholesale grain logo. And then you can see the actual typed out text is like a bluish purple. If you scan that in just grayscale, you could probably see that there's different tonalities to those, but you wouldn't be able to tell that this is as colorful as it is. And our goal with digitization is to preserve the original as best as possible. So capturing this in color and getting those variations is actually really crucial and important. So, and I really just like that Plano Wildcats baseball photo from, looks like the 70s there. That you wouldn't be able to see the beautiful maroon of those uniforms if you didn't scan it in color. Okay, so once you've considered the color space and the sort of format it is, we need to talk about the resolution or the image quality. The resolution is a measurement of the output quality of a digital image. It is also based on the object size, and ultimately how you are going to be using the digitized file. So often, resolution is expressed as DPI, which is dots per inch, or PPI, pixels per inch. So the more dots or pixels in a space, the higher the resolution or quality of your image. So, and higher resolution, it generally follows that an image has greater clarity and definition and file size because you are saving more information than you would at a lower resolution. Most scanners will allow you to select all of your scanning resolutions in the settings. I would be very surprised if they didn't let you save it at all. If you're doing it on your phone, it might not have as robust details that you could use, but on any like flatbed or planetary scanner that you're going to use, you should be able to adjust the resolution. Something else that will also impact the image quality is the bit depth, or the number of bits used to represent each pixel in an image. So if any of y'all are video gamers, if you've heard of like 8-bit or 16-bit, 24-bit color, that's what that is referring to. So the number of bits used indicate the color of a single pixel. So the more bits, the greater bit depth it has, the more accurate the color representation. So if you think of like the difference between Super Mario Brothers on a Super Nintendo, which was 8-bit, or on a regular Nintendo, excuse me, which is 8-bit, compared to a Super Nintendo that was like 16-bit, compared to like a Nintendo 64, that is a 64-bit. You can see, if y'all are familiar with those, how improved the images got over time and how many more colors we got over time. It's because they got more bits. Okay, so here's another example of how, oh, here, we can look back at this screen real quick. So our circles on the screen here give an example of DPI. You can see they are the same sized circle. However, 10 DPI, so it's only going to be 10 dots per inch compared to 300 dots per inch. You can see it smooths it out because there's more information that is reading in that area. So even 72 looks a lot better than the 10, but compare that to 300, you can really see the difference. So then here's another example about resolution where you can see the difference. Compared the same image scanned at 72 pixels per inch and at 600 pixels per inch. You can see it is a lot clearer. We have a lot of that detail that is not included in the 72 PPI scan of it. So a good rule of thumb for this is for objects that are 5 by 7 inches or larger. You will want to scan at about 300 DPI for any digital purpose. Like if you just want general purpose, you just want to have a copy of this digitized in case something catastrophic happens, 300 should be good enough for your purposes. If you're planning to enlarge the photos to any significant size, you might want to scan a little bit higher DPI at like 400 or 600. You shouldn't have to go any higher than that. For objects that are smaller than 5 by 7, use 600 as your starting point. Just because for little things, we want to make sure you can blow them up on a computer and see them better, and you want to make sure you're capturing all that information. Side note, please do remember this will take longer. The higher resolution, the higher DPI that you select, the longer it is going to take for the scanner or computer to process and save, since there's going to be more information, and therefore we're dealing with larger file sizes. So it's again, like if it's a thing that you need to do, you can do it, but otherwise you are just making more work for yourself if you are not actually going to need this higher resolution thing in the future. And then if you see on the right-hand side, we do have a kind of an example of what your controls within a flatbed scanner might look like. And you can see how you could adjust the DPI there. You can see it does go up to much, much higher DPIs than what we've suggested. If you are planning on enlarging like a smaller object to something like poster size, then you might need that higher DPI. But even if you're doing like photo printing and stuff like that, for most books, like up to an 8 by 10 sized, like a really big sized book, 400 will be good enough quality. How are we doing? Any questions? Rolling right along. We are almost to the end, y'all. Y'all are being awesome, sticking in, hopefully learning some really good stuff right now. Okay, so then lastly, we said consider file formats. So in general, what do you save your files as? If you think about that, that's going to give you a good general rule of thumb for how you're going to save any items that you're digitizing. So for images, for your archival or your master image copy, you should use a TIFF or a PNG. These are the best file formats for images. They use a lossless compression. So they preserve the image fully and are archival data quality. So if you're going to be doing quality printing or digital archiving, those are going to be the formats that you would want to use. If there is a con to using these, it is that the file images can be very large because you are saving more information to them. But that's why we like to use them for the master copy. So it just depends, again, on like your purpose for using these, why you are digitizing them. Or if you just need a quick general use, sharing via email, you just want to scan and send some to your family, then you might not need the TIFF or PNG if you don't plan on doing anything else with them, and you could use just something like a JPEG. Typically, these are called derivative images. They can be used for like web page applications, email, or smaller scale printing. So JPEG are, if we consider TIFF and PNG lossless compression, JPEGs will do data encoding that will compress the information. That discards it's getting a little technical, but it discards some of the representative data that is scanned in order to reduce the file size for storing or transmitting the image. So to the naked eye, the images should look very, very similar. But sometimes if you try to zoom in or if you're trying to print, that is where you would see the difference. So again, this is where having your plan will help.
Or
Yes.
I have a quirky example. In other words, to visualize that I just thought of. It kind of made me giggle, and I just have to share it. So for the lossless for your archival, the TIFF or the PNG, that's more of a lossless compression. Think of it as like you've got a 20-pound bag of sugar. You know, the grains of sugar in a 20-pound bag. If you use the JPEG, which is compresses the files, you're compressing that. You're having a smaller file, so you're having a 5-pound bag or a 10-pound bag, but you got 20 pounds of data. It's going to discard a good portion of that full file to fit that smaller data packet, let's say. So I don't know, that kind of sounds stupid now saying it out loud.
I get where you were going. It's like, I think the TIFF would be it's the 20-pound bag of sugar with all the sugar inside. Your JPEG would be just the bag. It wouldn't have all the sugar saved inside. That's kind of where you were going.
Well, it's going to be some lossless, so it's going to discard some amount of that sugar.
Yeah,
some
the sugar
amount
is
of that
gone now.
data.
You just have the bag. You just have the image of the bag on the outside, not the whole
Yeah.
sugar bag.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
There is
Okay.
someone, sorry,
Yes.
I think it's a more specific example, but she's asking, so clarification.
Mhm.
So the files on my computer in folders should be saved as TIFF or PNG. Oh, sorry, I jumped.
Yes.
But the files attached to my family tree maker tree could be saved as JPEG.
Yes. Yeah. So if you would just wanted to have your archival master copy saved on your computer, but then because you can always take your TIFFs and PNGs and then do like a save as or export as and then save them as the JPEGs as well. So you would have like you would have 2 copies of your image of your digitized object. So you could, yeah, like save your TIFF or PNG just on your computer. But then if you wanted to like upload something to family tree maker, or you wanted to, like I said earlier, go in and Photoshop it, then you would use the JPEG for that. Because then, yeah, sometimes it might be like too large if you were trying to upload the TIFF or the PNG. And they will, or like sometimes websites won't accept TIFFs, like it has to be a JPEG.
And it might have to be a small file at that to fit.
Yeah.
And a lot of, depending on your email service, a lot of email services won't accept a file or a number of files, your max of what you can send attached to an email, more than 10 megs of information. So, and you might have a TIFF that might be 15, 20, 30, or 40 megabytes just for one image, whereas you could attach multiple JPEGs that are perfectly usable for posting online that would be smaller than, 10 megs. You might have a couple of kilobytes of information or just 1 or 2 megabytes. And so you could attach multiple.
Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, or I guess, does that answer the question? So if you have any more questions, pop them in the chat. But
Yeah,
hopefully
it's
that
clear.
clarified that.
Yes, she said yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and then lastly, we do have PDFs as well, which I hope all of y'all are familiar with. That is a way that if you have like a document that maybe you want to save it that way, it is an easy format to share. Most people should have access or be able to open and read it. It cannot be modified. So a PDF is typically just like a flat image. That's why, like, sometimes if you had to try and like edit a PDF and it won't let you, that is why it is made to be uneditable. So if you're just, again, trying to have a copy of this digitized and you want to be able to easily share it, it's a letter or a document versus like an image, you might consider doing it as a PDF. But you can still scan documents in as TIFFs or PNGs as well. That doesn't hurt anything. And it not mentioned on here, but we'll have a quick side note because some people when we've taught this class before have asked about RAW format. So RAW is a format you typically see on like if you have like an SLR or a digital SLR camera that you will see on there. RAW is the format that is closest to film quality. It does not compress an image before saving, and it does give a lot of control in the like in post processing. However, the format requires a lot of storage memory and is not compatible with some editing or viewing softwares. So it is a good file format, but typically you're going to want to use things that are going to be more, again, going back to the beginning, more accessible to people. And since RAW is not accessible to everybody, or sending a RAW file might not be able to be opened by everybody, sticking to something that is more common, like TIFF or PNG or a JPEG, is typically better to do. Okay, so if this has totally just piqued your interest and all you want to do is learn about scanning standards and best practices for your digitization, boy, are you in luck. The University of North Texas does put a lot of their best practices online. Their scanning standards, like what DPIs they use, what's, I believe might have some of like what software, what technology, but at a minimum, what file formats they save in, how they come up with um, their titles for their objects. All of that they have put online. They also, if you're interested, the Texas State Library, their full title is the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. They do a lot of work in preservation and archival work. So they have some tips and tricks as well on their website and on their blog. So our final takeaways from this class. Make a plan. Once you have your plan in order, keep your workflow consistent. Make sure you scan the full front and back of your object because you never know what questions or what information you might need later, and if and or the document will be available to you at that time. Make sure to capture the entire object, stay true to the original, crop properly. Keep it square. You want to make sure your image is straight, not crooked. Make sure the tonal value matches the original as much as possible. This is half a joke, but half not. Keep duplicate copies of your files stored in safe, multiple locations. It's called the lock system. Lots of copies keeps it safe. I am one of those people that I have to have like 7 copies of any digital project that I do. I have them saved all over the different places just in case. You can never be too safe and secure. As long as you have your master archive folder, make copies of that all over the place. And then again, I will double this point down because I really think it's less important. Make your plan. Keep your consistent workflow. That is the biggest part of this. All right. And I believe that is everything that I have for y'all tonight. Thank you for joining us. Do we have any final questions? Anything else you would like me to clarify or go over before we wrap up tonight? No? Okay, well, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes. Um, thank you so much for attending. Please come and visit us in person at the Genealogy Center here at the Haggard Library. Or if you would like to learn more, we have plenty of our online classes such as this recorded and on our YouTube channel. So if you search for Plano Public Library on YouTube, you can find our page, and there is a full Genealogy Center Presents playlist with all sorts of other classes. And we have our Engage brochure out for the summer. So if you'd like to see what sort of classes we will have this summer, you can check that out as well. We'll have Stephanie. She's going to throw the link in the chat for you on the summer brochure. But thank you again so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you next time.